Okay. We're coming down to the end, and I've talked to Victoria and Meredith, and I asked them to come up with, are you going to be okay? And I asked them to think of all of this mess as like when you're studying anything, you'll always look at form and function. And I said, look at this from the standpoint of function first, and then back up and look at the form. But what they've done is not an end all. What this is, and I'll let them explain it further, but it's a beginning. And hopefully it'll make some sense of it. But I'm going to turn it over to Victoria and Meredith. Meredith is first. Go ahead, please.
Okay, is this working? Hi, good morning, Chairman Highland and committee. I'm Meredith Fry from the Kansas Legislative Research Department. Victoria Potts and I will be presenting this morning on the 2021 Kansas Water Organizational Chart. So to begin, I think everyone has one. This is a draft organizational chart based on the agency presentations that you guys have all heard. You guys will be discussing and making recommendations and edits to this. The lists of responsibilities, programs, and publications under each agency name is not an exhaustive list. These are just major areas that the agencies covered in their presentations. And also note that there is no hierarchy in this chart. It is just laid out. There's no hierarchy. And then you'll also notice that each agency is assigned a color that is consistently used throughout the chart. And the key is up there in the upper right corner. So to begin, with the large categories of water organization, you'll notice the 5 black circles across the top. And these were kind of derived from listening to all the presentations and trying to figure out where everything kind of fits. And like we said, these can change. But what we have right now is research and data, water quality, water policy, water quantity, and emergency management. And then Victoria will touch on these, but there's under the last three, there's actually the gray circles, and those are subcategories. So to begin with research and data, you'll notice that there's 4 under that: the Kansas Forest Service, the K-State Research and Extension, Kansas Geological Survey, and Kansas Biological Survey. And these are non-regulatory agencies that do not administer rules and regulations, and they are affiliated with the universities in the state, and they interact heavily and support other state agencies. And now I will turn it over to Victoria.
Thank you, committee. Again, my name is Victoria Potts with Legislative Research, and I'm going to go over water quality to start with. So you'll notice that water quality mostly deals with, we're talking about surface water. It's not, there's exceptions to every rule, as you've learned with water, but primarily we're talking about the protection of surface water quality. And you'll notice that of the 7 circles, KDHE is the major player in this category. They have the most circles. And although, as Meredith said, there are programs listed in each circle, I won't go through each of those because you've heard about them in the presentations. But I will just mention why we thought that each agency belonged under each category. So starting with KDHE. KDHE Water belongs in water quality, we believe, because they set and monitor water quality standards. KDHE Environmental Remediation deals with the cleanup of contaminated sites, so that includes sites that might pollute water. KDHE Field Services deals primarily with non-source point pollution and watershed protection. And KDHE waste management deals with the permitting of hazardous and solid waste facilities. And again, that's about protecting water from runoff from those facilities. KDA conservation deals with the implementation of conservation practices to protect water from sediment and nutrient runoff. The Corporation Commission deals with the protection of usable water, specifically during the well drilling and plugging process. So again, protecting water. And the Department of Commerce provides grants for wastewater and water infrastructure. So that's just briefly touching on why we believe that each of those belong in water quality. I'll move on to water policy next. Under water policy, as Meredith mentioned, there are two subcategories. So we'll start with water planning and administration. And you'll see the Kansas Water Office is the primary player in water policy overall. So the Water Office handles the developing of the state water plan, but they also hear from stakeholders such as the conservation districts that you heard from, GMDs, especially regional advisory committees that you'll hear from on Tuesday. On Tuesday. So even though it falls under the Kansas Water Office, I do want to emphasize that it is a collaborative process to create the state water plan. The Kansas Water Authority is an advisory committee on which most of the agencies listed here have a seat. So again, it's a collaborative process. The Water Office also deals with drought monitoring and response, which obviously plays into water planning. You have to know how much water you're dealing with in order to create something like a state water plan. Moving on to reservoir protection and management. Again, the Kansas Water Office is listed first because the Kansas Water Office handles the reservoir operation, so that includes the leasing of storage space to municipal and industrial users to get access to water in reservoirs. But we also wanted to note that KDA Conservation contributes to the protection of reservoirs through their conservation practices, particularly in preventing sediment from running off into reservoirs. I'll move on to water quantity next. So first, under water quantity, we have water structures. So KDA, that's Kansas Department of Agriculture, Division of Water Resources. They inspect dams and review applications for new dams and approve floodplain ordinances and regulations. So again, all dealing with the control of water quantity through water structures like dams. We also wanted to note the role of KDA Conservation in their assistance with watershed dam construction. The next subcategory is water appropriations. So KDA DWR, again, that's Division of Water Resources, as you well know by now, processes applications for water rights. So obviously very much in line with water quantity that we're talking about. And we also wanted to note Kansas Water Office, again, contributes to drought monitoring because that will impact how much water is available to be given out. You've heard a lot about water rights and senior water rights and how junior water rights during a drought will receive less. I won't get it. We'll move on to water management. In water management, KDA, DWR, again, they administer interstate compacts. And finally, move on to emergency management. That first category under emergency management is mitigation. And several agencies contribute to the planning for future disasters. So KDA DWR, again, as I mentioned, approves floodplain regulations and applications. The Water Office, again, contributes to drought monitoring. We generally think of a disaster as being a flood, but a drought, it can also be a disaster. So we need to recognize Water Office's role in drought monitoring. KDHE Water helps create public water emergency plans to ensure access to clean drinking water during a disaster. And the Adjutant General creates the Kansas Response Plan. Disaster assistance is this last category. So the Adjutant General has a role in securing clean drinking water during a disaster in case infrastructure is compromised. They also play a role in flood mapping. And finally, wildlife parks and tourism participates in disaster assistance by providing search and rescue as needed. And Mr. Chairman, Meredith and I will stand for questions on the water organizational chart.
Thank you very much. Okay, committee, it's time to go to work. Representative Bishop. Yes.
Attending virtually, so I've forgotten the drill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I notice a slight anomaly that maybe there's something I'm overlooking, but under water quantity, we've got the interstate compacts. And back here under water quality, there does not appear to be any reflection of the fact that we have a water quality issue relative to interstate compacts. So I don't know how, you know, if we need a line through there somewhere.
Sure, I mean, and that's exactly the type of thing that we want to discuss. And as Meredith said, this is something that you all will be making recommendations on. So if we can definitely consider that and talk about it, that's definitely an issue from water quality. So absolutely, yeah, that's something we can consider adding to the chart.
Mr. Chairman, just for the benefit of folks that may be listening, we do have a problem with the interstate compact with Colorado at least, because we are finding a lot of harmful metals that are in the water that's coming from Colorado. Even though the quantity is probably appropriate, we're having a hard time dealing with that. And it has caused some difficulty, expense, and consternation for some of our small cities to the west.
Good catch. We have the quality is in the compact with Nebraska, but it is not with Colorado, as we learned. So that'll be a federal lawsuit. Any other comments, questions on all of this? Either everybody is really up on this stuff. Oh, they're asleep. Representative Riley.
I really like this color chart. I think it's really good. Is there any way that we could get a similar chart based on the folks that we've already seen with their contacts of who's the head of each one of those departments? So we can cross-reference this chart with folks that we can contact if we have questions about something.
So you're wanting to look at a personnel org chart?
Well, at least a contact liaison, who's the head of that department, or the director of that department, kind of thing.
I think that'd be a good chart to have as we move forward. And then also when you do that one, just the total budget for each of these groups, and break it down by state general funds, federal funds, and fee funds.
Yep, we already working on that. It will be ready for the discussion on Monday. So absolutely.
You're ahead of me. Good, good. Anything else, folks? Representative Newland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Victoria, I know that the Corps is not part of Arkansas. We don't have the control over that. But they're an important part of a lot of things that we do in the state. And is there a place that we could plug them in on this chart that, you know, may affect us in many ways? And I was wondering if, I don't know if we need that or not for sure, but I think those contacts or those connections probably ought to be made.
Well, I visualize that chart as a separate one, federal agencies, and then arrows going to whatever department they interact with.
Good point.
And I think there were 5 of them. We got the Tulsa Division, the Kansas City Division, those two, and then we have the Corps of Engineers. And then we had that new one,
The Bureau of Reclamation, are you thinking of?
yeah. So maybe if we had a chart with those and then an arrow to what groups they interact with, would be good to have as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Representative Byers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate the way this chart is laid out. It's great. My question is this. Are we looking at the ultimate goal of maybe providing something like this for end users so that there's like a website and someone comes in as one-stop shopping for their water needs in Kansas, where they can look at something like this and click on a button and it takes them to more information they might need? Is that maybe one of the things we may come out of this?
If that's the desire of the committee, that's one of the things that will come out of this.
Because I know that when I talk with folks and they're saying who does what, where,
Right.
this would be a great way of being able to sit down and say, and have links into those various organizations so they can click in and go in and see who they need to talk to about a specific issue.
So please make a note that when we get done with this, one of our end goals is to have a website then with easy to find information.
Okay, thank you.
And if it's structured like this, colors and whatever, then it would be great. Thank you for that. Representative Jennings.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Very much appreciate the work that the legislative research staff have done to put this together. Not just to challenge their talents and abilities, but I wonder if there would be any way that this could be, either this chart or something similar to it could be structured in a way that we might use it as an interactive tool. And my question about this is, if we think about the way that water is structured in Kansas right now, it's obviously a complex, multifaceted, far-reaching kind of thing. And if there's any desire to perhaps structure this in some different way, it would be kind of nice to be able to cut and paste various functions or duties maybe from one to another. So I guess that's the question, could such a thing be developed so that you could move these little tasks around from one place to another if you wanted to experiment with restructuring?
I'd have to ask research, is that, now you've presented this to us in PDF format. What program did you use to create it?
So our department used, it's called Visio. It's pretty static from my understanding, to be honest. One of our editing team did it because even we don't have the license for Visio, to be honest. So it is kind of a static program. So the easiest way, which I know isn't ideal for Representative Jennings' question, is, to be honest, just for us to take notes and come back with different versions for you. I know that's not very tech savvy, but it is what we have currently.
You know, maybe a spreadsheet with the color-coded columns with the various functions under the title of the agency would be a format that would make it more subject to being moved around.
Sure. So something similar to the rainbow chart that we had been working off of from the beginning. That is actually an Excel spreadsheet. So we can definitely work on something in Excel, no problem.
Thank you.
I would see like this in an Excel format with the columns and then these under them. Yeah, exactly. And then the members could fool around and moving things around. And that'd be great. Sounds like. Well, Representative Jennings wants this. So. And I could be playing around with it too. And you could too. You just need to get up to speed.
You're just going to make me come in the room, aren't you?
Yep. Eventually. Any other questions, committee? These are good comments. At least we'll start here. Representative Minix.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for the benefit of some of our committee members, Representative Byers mentioned where do we go if you're an end user. We're trying to make this as simple for people as possible, but there's a lot of people out there in the industry. For an example, Kansas Livestock Association has an environmental company that works for them, for people within the livestock industry. They go to them and they deal with water issues on their particular operations and stuff. And I'm sure the League of Municipalities has someone within their group that's very good at working with water issues, and same thing with counties and others. What we're specifically dealing with here is the state operations and agencies, and trying to make this more clear to everybody else. But there's an amazing amount of people out in the state of Kansas who wanted to get entirely to end users. We'd almost triple this chart with the people that are between the people on this chart and our end users. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Then I'm going to leave it to you to make suggestions on how we include that in our final product. Since you brought it up. That's not going to get you out of it. We'll talk about it. But I like the idea. There are a lot of places you can go at that level. But if we had, at the very end, have Representative Byers' suggestions there, and then another category for, say, each county, and then the contacts for each county listed, something like that, and their contacts. That'd be good. But yes, our principle is for the state agencies and all that. But like you said, their contacts are available out there in their regions, and it'd be good to have that information all in one place for anybody to use at that point. Understand? Any other questions, comments? Representative Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the elements that I noticed from looking at this is that it is very much focused on, of course, water as a commodity. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. And we all, of course, know that there are environments that pertain to a lot of these water issues. For instance, if we look at the watershed, it's found under water quantity in 2 places, but that's very much an environmental issue. And I can see the possibility of at least somewhat of an overlay. It may be that that's such a given that it's not necessary, but I did want to point it out. An overlay with which elements in here specifically relate to other environmental issues, the flora and fauna that are in these areas and so forth. That seems to be especially evident where watershed issues are concerned. I know that we had a lot of interest from some youngsters who were interested in what the Water Committee was doing and what direction we were going in and wanted to follow it, who were very interested in watersheds and environmental issues. And it'd be nice if we could come up with some way to point out a footnote or something which issues are of particular interest to environmental concerns. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that. And following up on that, I'm wondering if that wouldn't be something ideally fitting under like the research and data with another category down, environmental issues to be studied, and then if something was identified, then move over under either quality or quantity. Okay? Any other questions, comments? It's a lot to digest, so that's why we did this first one today. You'll have the weekend to study, and then on Monday, we'll come back and hit it again, and they've already started on gathering some of the information we talked about, so there'll be more coming to add to this. And Then we'll finish out this session next week. And you've done a great job. Thank you very much, both Victoria and Meredith. Thank you very much. With that, I see nothing more.